This video will be brushing on heavy topics that may be triggering to viewers. A trigger warning for sexual assault, suicide, and violence is in effect. And of course, there are spoilers for the show. My time in what was considered to be the world's longest, harshest lockdown, 2 years, I have found myself watching a lot of content, and I even decided to go out of my usual comfortable routine of watching the same shows that bring me comfort. I only had Netflix at the time, and I kept seeing a recommendation for a thriller from Thailand called Girl from Nowhere. I caved and actually decided to watch it, as I never usually watch thrillers. When watching the show, I found that I was in for a brutal time. Just to give you a quick summary of the show, Nanno, a girl that no one ever knows and is quite literally from nowhere, arrives as a new student at a new high school every episode, usually unsuspecting at first meeting, but the people around her start to notice something quite off about her nature the more they get to know her. The people she befriends all seem to have one thing in common, and that is a killer dark side. So she goes to every school to backstab, expose, and even tempt people to follow their intrusive thoughts. She is basically the devil on your shoulder, nudging you further into your own cruel intentions. The most surprising thing about these people she meets is that many of them don't ever have these intentions to maim or even kill someone at first. In fact, it wouldn't happen unless Nanno came into the picture to seek the true nature of a human. She is also the Punisher. So where to begin with this analysis? We need to talk about the main antagonist. A high school student that is literally from nowhere. Nobody knows of her origin, and honestly, no one ever finds out, as much as they try. Although in season 2, we actually get an idea, but I will get to that later. Nanno is not an introvert and has charisma, and a great ability to make friends with anyone she meets. She can climb social ladders, or even simply make herself scarce to students as a way to slip through the cracks to carry out her malicious plans. The plans in question: teaching people lessons. We quickly learn that she is obsessed with it, and we also learn that she's very intelligent and has a way of sourcing evidence and gossip. Even though she is seemingly at the root of every horrible climax, we beg to question if she was even to blame for the horrifying situations that unfold amongst students, as it is them that tend to carry out the brutalities of their own inner thoughts. She merely just gives them a nudge in the right direction. She plays with the thoughts and insecurities of many people, leading to sabotage, sexual assault, psychotic episodes, and many a time, murder. So every time, we, the audience, are left with the judgment. Did many of them actually deserve what was coming to them? Is this really who they were the whole time? In many episodes, it's made obvious who is deserving of judgment, but in others, we are forced to question Nanno's judgment. But it's not known why she does all this, at least not until the second season. It's not until the second episode that we start to notice that Nanno is most certainly not ordinary, as in not human at least. She is brutally murdered at the hands of 2 insecure girls that she befriended and a couple of nasty boys. Without going into too much detail, there is a rape scene in which Nanno laughs the whole way through, maniacally. It's as if she has the upper hand, and this leads to those people worrying about themselves. So anyways, she ends up being murdered by her assaulter out of fear. He suffocates her, and she is seemingly quite dead. So everyone is forced to cover everything up. This includes burying Nanno's body. What they didn't expect to see the next morning is Nanno showing up to class alive and unscathed. In fact, she is beaming ear to ear and greets her murderers in a very friendly manner, as if nothing had happened. This obviously scares the shit out of them. What the heck is she? She then goes on to torment them with the evidence on the phone she had on her person at the time of the murder. A sound file of all of them talking and mentioning each other's names too. She really did have the upper hand, as always. They kill her again out of fear of what might happen to them at the hands of authorities. But when they go to bury her again, she is now everywhere at once and taunts them all. So we ask ourselves, is there more than one Nanno? Far from it, actually. If you are familiar with horror manga artist and literal cinnamon roll Junji Ito, you will know of his most popular character, Tomie. Even if you don't know about Ito's manga, you've definitely seen Tomie around in the media and on edgy TikTok. This is a ghost with stunning features, and she also sports black bangs and many a time a school uniform, just like Nanno. Tomie's dealings are mainly with men who are never what they seem to be on the surface, and once you meet Tomie, you're too late. Tomie brings out the darkness in their hearts, causing them to kill her every time. But seeing her alive the next day sends them into the pits of despair. She torments them without actually doing anything. I didn't actually realize this comparison until I took a deep dive into the Tomie story one time, and it didn't take me long to start drawing similarities. The creators of Girl From Nowhere haven't actually said there was an inspiration, but Nanno's actor Chicha Amatayaku actually mentioned that she used Tomie as inspiration for playing Nanno. Honestly, a great choice considering that Tomie is the literal embodiment of temptation. She has done nothing to please the people who become attracted to her. In fact, she does the opposite. Yet, people fall for her. Nanno has this similarity since she can easily attract people without using charm. She can get her way. Tomie had also actually died once and became immortal. She had some type of unfinished business, which I see a lot of in Nanno, this desire to get revenge. I found this helpful video that goes in depth into Tomie and how terrifying she is by Boofire191. Link in the description if you want to learn more about Tomie. I think this is a very good video. So back to Nanno's world. I said that nobody knows where she came from. Literally no one. She just turns up at different schools without one person recognizing her from anywhere. Well, it turns out that there are people who do. This is where things get a little lopsided and weird. And this isn't the only time that it does. It seems that Nanno's first school was many, many years ago when she was alive, presumably, but I'm not certain. It was a while ago. I might say the 90s, possibly really early 2000s. She was weird compared to her classmates. At times, antisocial, talking to a quote-unquote boyfriend on her phone every lunch. They all believe she is faking as they never see him. She is sent flowers, however, which makes them all suspicious of her, and this was on Valentine's Day. Now this is a pretty loaded episode, so I will just quickly gloss over the events that happen. For context, there are these two students who are well known as high school lovers, and everyone fawns over them. It just so happens that the boyfriend started falling for Nanno, and that is the boyfriend she is calling on her phone. Hence why he could never show up, and why no one believes Nanno. Nanno calls him by someone else to protect his identity for him. Anyways, everyone and the girlfriend find out and decide to brutally harm Nanno in an ambush using the boyfriend as bait to bring her to a secret location to be bagged over the head and beaten senseless by every single person in her class. This sort of event should have killed her, and I'm pretty sure it did, but she turns up to class after it. But instead of unscathed like the usual, she is looking terrible, beaten. This is why I think she may have been alive at the time and not a ghost. She leaves after this day. She is never to be seen again after this final scene, as she seemingly leaves school. We then get to the high school reunion party that was actually secretly planned by Nanno this whole time. And the students are unhappy to find that Nanno is back many years later, alive, in her school uniform as if she hadn't aged a day, and goes to expose every single one of her classmates in a little slideshow presentation of hers. She has evidence of her now adult classmates, each turning out to be awful people. Domestic violence, sexual assault of young talent, beauty product cover-ups, and self-harm as an attempt to trap a loved one. So much for being well-known lovers. So yes, there are people who still know her. Still doesn't tell us where she came from, but there's still a whole other season. Yuri is a girl who starts out as a mystery to us in season 2, as we only see glimpses of her in a few episodes and clues that she knows Nanno. This is until we get to meet her as Nanno finally confronts her formally. She is a fellow spirit, like Nanno. Her beginning of her afterlife was most likely an accident, as she was not a spirit when she met Nanno. They meet in an episode where Yuri is treated like a lackey by her clique. Nanno doesn't suck up to the mean girls as much as Yuri, but manages to get into the clique with ease. Her goal seems to be to protect Yuri and punish the girls. This group of girls are Nanno's targets for this episode. The leading girls are wealthy for reasons that are very downright wrong, and we find out that Yuri is absolutely aware of how she is being treated by the girls. Yuri claims that rich people take pity on the poor and treat them like charity. This is the easiest way for the poor to make money. As Yuri and Nanno work together to dismantle their system, they find the leader's laptop in her room filled with files of girls' names. Each file houses a video of each girl getting sexually assaulted and eventually killed, all in the space of a filthy confined room. Every lackey that the clique has let in is a victim that brings in money. This business of theirs pays them handsomely, as these videos cater to a much darker, unknown audience on the web. So Yuri and Nanno hatch a plan, which actually goes south in more ways than one. Yuri had her own plan, and threw Nanno under the bus. Yuri is found to be the bait that draws the new lackeys in, when she is actually higher up herself. But Nanno reveals that she already uploaded the documents of transactions and videos to the cloud. She taunts the mean girls, and then she is beaten to death on camera while Yuri filmed everything. Yuri decides to double-cross and throws her mates under the bus, making them suffer the same fate their lackeys and herself endured, and she then had all the evidence she needed. This was all planned from the start. She then gave the girls a taste of their own medicine and instructed the rapists to assault them, which ends up killing them. But then the men double-crossed and violently killed Yuri and take the tape and laptop with them, running from the scene. A strange thing happens in the bathtub that both Nanno and Yuri were dumped in. The blood of Nanno enters Yuri's body. This is likely to insinuate that Yuri was given Nanno's abilities. Also, most likely because Yuri was smart and unsuspecting, and also exposed utter chaos from people around her. The perfect candidate. She awakens, now immortal. This is also insinuated in the opening title sequence of Season 2. Things start to get a little more chaotic, and we soon start to see small cracks in Nanno's protected and perfected image. We find that Nanno and Yuri are spirits that go around and cast judgment upon the living. It is all basically revealed in the final episode when Nanno dies for good. Yuri's new student, Junko, takes Nanno's place. You see, Nanno starts to lose judgment, and she is growing softer towards her victims. She starts to regret her actions and second guesses whether some of these people actually deserve the punishment they got. Yuri finds that Nanno is no longer a fit to be a judge, surpassing her own teacher. In the last episode, Yuri and Nanno are both faced with one more case, which finally divides them. A mother, Wan, is found to be keeping her child wheelchair-bound with injections and pretending that her child is sick. There is a fundraiser for her daughter's hemophilia disease. This is thought that she is doing this to keep her daughter Junko safe from harm from other students, as she is relentlessly bullied and is an outcast. Nanno tries to help Junko, and pins revenge on Wan, concluding that Wan was responsible for killing school staff so they wouldn't find out her secret and keep the money for herself. Yuri keeps doubting Nanno, asking if she was sure that she is making a good decision as she watches Nanno. We get to the climax. Junko finally confronts her mother, standing on her own thanks to Nanno's preventative measures, keeping Wan from injecting a lethal medicine into Junko again, like she has been for a while, causing the disease. Yuri and Nanno have front row seats to watch the conclusion, except Nanno is faced with an astonishing revelation. Yuri shows the other side of this story. This mother was trying to protect others from her daughter, as she was extremely violent and endangered students and teachers. Wan explains that Junko was bullied so much that she despised all of humanity. Junko was also interested in biology and anatomy, which caused her to do dissections on her peers. So she paralyzed Junko's body with injections and hid the dead bodies of her daughter's victims in a freezer to protect her from authorities, and used the fundraiser money for the victims' families out of respect, because Wan felt like it was the only thing she could do. Yuri and Nanno are stuck in a puzzling predicament. It seems that Nanno has lost her touch, and her injuries given to her in this episode are not healing. But she is insistent that more needs to be considered in their judgments. She has lost her place as a judge. Junko and Wan end up killing each other after Junko impales Nanno first. Nanno slowly dies as she watches Yuri resurrect the daughter to be her student, pouring her own blood into Junko's mouth. A very promising candidate. So the conclusion is that Nanno is a spirit of judgment. Initially, I thought her to be the embodiment of temptation or a human's inner darkness, a metaphor. But I think this last episode pretty much confirms that she is much more than that. Yuri reveals to a dying Nanno that she will take it a step further and pit the entire world against each other with her new student. This could potentially throw off the balance of good and evil. But then apparently, Nanno didn't die in Nanno fashion. But she did experience mortality with her wounds not healing. But I think the final verdict was that she is actually immortal. The show doesn't quite specifically state whether she actually died. A lot of this is theory. Many of the episodes are actually inspired by real crimes and events. One example is in an episode where a wealthy troublemaker, Minnie, drunkenly takes a drive and kills a bunch of students in the back of a bus. She kills 4 students. She gets let off the hook with no charges. This causes a countrywide backlash. She is also haunted for most of the episode, driven to insanity. This was allegedly similar to a real injustice of a 17-year-old killing 9 people when she was driving on a tollway without a license. She was sentenced to community service and no jail time. There was a huge movement on social media opposing this legal conclusion. The hashtag #PrayWere9Corpses started to appear. Nanno never just stays at one school and is always a fresh new face every episode. But why is the narrative always set in an educational setting? There are many reasons, but the main one being that every school has a different way of dealing with students and learning. And honestly, high school is basically a big battleground. Many schools are known for their deeply unorthodox methods of teaching and discipline, and this goes for schools around the globe. For example, the first school we go to is very hell-bent on being pure, which means practicing abstinence and no mention of sex, even though the students are all teenagers and are meant to be feeling things about it at this age. Like, I literally cannot stress enough why abstinence is actually damaging, but anyways, we are not in sex education right now. Instead, they are forced to watch yoga videos to encourage meditation with the intention of taking sex off the brain, or so the teachers thought. There's another school later in the season that has an emphasis on scholarly achievement, and being the best in school subjects, which makes the students quite competitive and self-conscious. This also shows schools taking advantage of their scholars' talents to attain a great image at the cost of their students' mental health. Most of the schools have massive flaws in the way they educate their students, how students learn from adults that can be quite unstable themselves. So what does this all mean? What was this all about? Why was the main setting an educational environment? Maybe it's because that's when Nanno died. Like actually died. The first time that started her career as a judge. But what is the show trying to tell us? I believe that on the whole that it painted a picture of the human race. It painted them as deeply complicated, but ultimately unforgiving creatures with cruel intentions. That there isn't a living soul that is truly a pure soul. Nanno was there to prove this in a way, except she wasn't seeing them as complicated at first, not until the end. She purely saw it as black and white initially, which made her job very easy in the beginning. As for the setting, the schools, I think there was also a message being told about how schools are not always a good place to learn life lessons, and it's such a vital point in a growing child's life. I don't think this is purely just talking about schooling in Thailand, because many countries, and where I live, Australia, have these types of schools. Elitist schools that put scholars on pedestals and leave the others as dead weight. No proper sex education being taught mainly due to religious reasons. Schools with teachers that want to enforce unorthodox methods of education, and schools that allow a social ranking system to take over among students. There was even a theme of adults taking advantage of students. The first episode opened on a case where the yoga teacher had been grooming students in the yoga program. This results in a teen's unwanted pregnancy. And another issue, the lack of awareness that teachers have when it comes to the personal lives of the students. A lot of the time, bullying is never found out by teachers or even brushed under the rug to save the school's reputation. Kinda like what happened to me and what happens to countless others in our schooling years. They even explore classism in a few episodes. Most specifically in Yuri's episode, rich people take pity on the poor and can make them do absolutely anything for them if charity is involved. These episodes show the extraordinary lengths poor families go to keep their heads above water, especially to get their kids into good schools for the best education. But seeing the rich kids use their wealth to get out of classes, out of learning, something that poor people work so hard for, is another form of evil. And to see them get more than just good schooling because of their status alone, it's messed up in many ways. One thing I'll mention before you go and watch this show, there are 2 episodes that depict sexual assault, but only one of the episodes actually have a disclaimer at the very beginning of the episode. Season 1, episode 2 has a quite heavy sexual assault scene that they failed to mention. As for the rumored 3rd season, I doubt that there is one. I think people were hoping and estimated its potential release based on the previous dates the seasons have been released. If I had to take a guess, I'm guessing the 3rd season would look at Yuri's mission on raising hell, and maybe Nanno potentially landing the biggest revenge plot yet. I mean, to be crossed again in the immortal realm, I'd be fuming too. I think it would do well if it were remade years into the future, maybe in different countries, as there are many lessons to be taught when it comes to different schools of the world, different issues related to each country. But honestly, I think it's great on its own. It's not totally isolated to just Thailand in terms of relatability and social issues. It is something that everyone can watch and relate to. This show transcends language, which is very good for a show. How did they handle the story? It is a horror after all. The uncomfortable amounts of violence in the show made a huge impact on audiences. Many deaths are pretty creative in how they play out, and some are pretty satisfying when it happens to a character who truly deserved it. But of course, not everyone in this show deserves it. You could pretty much class it as a revenge show, and people really eat that up. It's a high school drama, with bad people getting punished, and Nanno always getting the upper hand if bad things happen to her. That's most likely why she became a demon child, to get revenge again and again after she met her own demise at the hands of people who on the outside seemed like innocent, pure people. She may have even lost her faith in basically everyone until she met one person who didn't actually deserve the punishment she got. It's safe to say that Nanno was a vengeful spirit caught in the cycle of violence. But I think this also raises a question on humanity. Is anyone really a pure person?